Hey everybody, what's going on? So today we're talking about a camera system that was just announced a few months ago from Canon. And this is sort of their entry into the cinema world. Now with the RF5 and the RF6, which we previously reviewed here on the channel, these are great hybrid camera systems, but there were limitations on the video side of it. Overheating, time limits, and all that stuff, because Canon wants to really separate those cameras versus the C-series cameras. Well, shortly after the R5 and R6 launched, they announced the C70. That is onto the market, that's what we're using right now, and that's what we're gonna be talking about today. Now we're currently recording this opening in all Ultra 4K 10-bit 422 C-Log3 with the speed booster, the 0.71 magnifier from Canon with the 24-105 f2.8 lens on it. So without further ado, let's talk about the all-new C70. So before we get into this, I do want to thank Canon Singapore and Canon Asia Pacific for allowing me to test drive this camera. I had it for about 10 days. It's going back to Canon right after this review. So this is not going to be a full in-depth review, but more of a first impression, hands-on feel of the C70 from someone that's really never shot with a cinema camera from Canon before. Basically, my video experience is coming from the Lumix S1H, the A7S III, the R5, the R6, A7 III for that matter, but more of that hybrid consumer grade camera system. So I was really interested to try this because Canon, you know, when they introduced the C70, it was like this introduction into the cinema world. And for me, I'm doing a lot more video nowadays, and I'm looking for a camera for my personal use where it is mainly strictly video, where I don't have to think about photography with it, where I can just set it up in my home studio, wherever I'm at shooting, and that is my video camera with fantastic image quality. So the C70 really piqued my interest, and I think for some of you out there, you might be like me, because I was watching a lot of reviews on YouTube as well. And a lot of the reviewers are cinematographers, or they do this for a living. So they're coming from a very different mindset versus someone like myself, or maybe you, who are new to the cinema world. So I thought, let's take that angle of approach here with this review and talk about the C70 in that regards. So let's talk about the design of the camera first. It's very reminiscent of a 1DX body style, but it's more modernized. And I love the 1DX. I've talked about this in my 1DX Mark II review and the Mark III review. And I love the build quality, and this has that and even more so. As a matter of fact, in my R5 and R6 review, I did talk about how I felt the build quality could have been improved, and maybe Canon will take some of the design language from the C70 and bring it into the future R-series cameras, because this feels robust. It feels like you can take it anywhere out there. It is durable, texture, the grip, everything feels fantastic to it. Now we got to talk about the texture of this camera, because I love what Canon's done. It's the small things that you notice in the C70 that really make it an enjoyable camera to use. Case in point, there's nothing that's really smooth on this camera. Now you have this sort of rough front and the grip of it, which most cameras have, but on the top, on the bottom of it, has a much more of a fine texture to it, almost light grain sandpaper. Now, some reviewers have complained about this, like, why did Canon do this? I appreciate it, because here in Singapore, we're in a very hot and humid climate. And, you know, our hands get sweaty very easily, and we can work up a sweat when we're outdoor shooting. And something that's very slick can feel very slippery in the hands, versus this camera, you grip it, it feels good no matter where you have it. And this texture is also on the top handle as well. In addition, the buttons and the dials all feel really good. Nothing feels inexpensive, nothing feels lack of quality on this camera whatsoever. You also have a lot of customizable buttons on this camera, so if you really want to customize it based on the features and the inputs that you want to have on this camera, easy access, you can do that. And that's something that I really appreciate with it. And that's something that I think someone that's new to me to the cinema world, these cameras, I mean, the designers at Canon, of course, thought of everything, but they put a lot in a very compact body. Now, it's not as compact as, let's say, the R5 and R6, but it's compact enough to where it looks professional when you're on set, but it's also easy to carry around. And we'll talk more about that later on in this review. But on the back of it, you also have a beautiful display that's flip out rotatable. It's very usable. It's touchscreen as well. portions of it are touchscreen. It's not the brightest display, so if you're out in like bright daylight like we are right now, it's best to use an external monitor if you really want a bright display. But if you're indoors and in controlled lighting sources, you will be fine with this display. Now, it is touch on the main aspect of the display, but once you go into the menu, you are reliant on the joystick and dials. I don't know why Canon did this, because Canon is known to have some great touch interfaces on their menu systems from their R5, R6s, but for whatever reason, they did not make this touchscreen capable in the menu system. Also, the battery life on this is fantastic. The battery that comes with it, you can get to about 3 hours of video recording thereabouts, depending on how you're shooting with this. And also, you can get an external, a larger capacity battery to get even more runtime with it. So there's no issues at all with this. We shot a few reviews on this C70 already, and we had no issues with battery life whatsoever. In addition, one of the things I really appreciate about the C70 are the built-in ND filters. Because, you know, when we've shot on the various other camera systems we've done here on the channel, the S1H, the A7S3, A7 III, R5, R6, we need variable ND filters, especially if we want to shoot outdoors. And you need a number of them, and they can get quite costly depending on the quality that you want. And variable NDs are never as good as a single ND filter. Well, here in the camera, you have built-in ND filters up to 10 stops. And they are beautiful, and they work phenomenal, and it's great. They put this mechanism inside this body, and they made it work. And this saves a lot of money in the long run. So what is it like to use? Well, for a cinema camera, it's quite compact. Now, I do have it rigged up a little bit more than comes out of the box. Rice Ball Photography is a shop that I work with here in Singapore for a lot of my reviews, and they were kind enough to loan me this small rig external handle on this to sort of give balance to the camera, as well as this port keys external monitor as well to help me with the viewing angles. And this is a larger monitor that comes with the C70, and it's a little brighter as well. With the C70, as you notice, it does come with this grip here, or this strap for the grip. But after a while, you want to use it with two hands, because unless you have really strong forearms, you will notice the weight, especially with the RF lenses. But with this secondary grip here, it does make it a lot easier and helps with the balance. Now, this camera does have IS inside of it. It is digital IS. You will get a slight crop when you're using it, but it's nothing major, not like it was on, like, say, the EOS R or anything else like that. It works really well. And the digital IS also works in combination with the image stabilization inside of the lenses, depending on the lens that you have. So you can get some really stable shots with the C70. And it doesn't look electronic, it doesn't look weird or anything like that when you're editing. No issues at all with it. It looks relatively good. Besides that, I mean, everything that's placed here feels really well. The joystick is in a good place. They have this small dial here where some people have complained about hitting it on accident. You don't have to turn it on with any functionality there. I don't have it on. Besides that, it feels really good to use. And this is a camera that, you know, being a cinema camera, I thought to myself, okay, I'll only take it out for video shoots, but I was actually taking it out throughout the day, trying different things, exploring with this, even taking it to, let's just capture this guy recording here on a bike. Speaking of which, autofocus, let's talk about it. Dual pixel autofocus inside of this. You also have tracking and face tracking as well. I do want to talk about the autofocusing a little bit, because this is something that you do need to take note of if you're coming from, let's say, an EOS R5 or R6. It's not as responsive, okay? Now, while Canon is touting that it's the same, technically the same dual pixel autofocus that's in those cameras, it is slightly slower. And if you're shooting in 4K 120 on this, you will notice that the autofocus isn't really as good as it is normally, let's say in 24p or 60 frames per second. It is a little bit, it's not bad, but it will sometimes hunt and search, almost like it's a contrast-based system, especially when you're shooting in C-Log 2, because it is a flat profile. It does have sometimes depicting the contrast points in your scene. So if you are finding that you are struggling a little bit, I would say just drop it to 709 and you shouldn't have any issues at all. It works better in that setting versus C-Log 2 or 3. Maybe this is something that Canon can address in a future firmware update, but I found it to be not a bad thing. I mean, normal recording, daily recording wasn't much of an issue. Also, let's talk about the UHS-2 cards in this, because you have two dual card slots in this. And the nice thing is that you can really customize this for relay. So if you want, once you're done finishing on one card, it will automatically go to the next. You can record simultaneously at the same time in different formats. So let's say you want to shoot 4K in one on one card and 1080 on the other, you can do that simultaneously. And there's various other different settings you can do in this. So it's really something that's new to me. I really enjoyed this aspect, because sometimes you want redundancy just in case a card fails. you don't lose all that footage, especially for the things that we do here on this channel. We shoot a review. Sometimes we have a camera for a very limited amount of time, and if we lose the footage, that's it. That review doesn't go out. So to have this backup and this redundancy really does help. I wish it did have a CF Express card slot though. It doesn't. Maybe that'll come in a future C90 or C whatever camera that'll come out there, but the UHS-2 card slots still do the job and readily available, and they're not as expensive as CF Express cards, so that's not a problem with that as well. The image quality is beautiful. The test footage that I shot was fantastic. It's small enough that you can fit it onto a gimbal. Also, what's interesting about this, you can actually use this camera in portrait mode, because a lot of us are now using that for our social media, Instagram and various different platforms. What's up guys? So I'm trying out this portrait mode here on the C70. Doing a little vlogging style with this, with the 1535. That bike almost hit us, but luckily Bryce has got eyes behind the back of his head as he's filming me. So you see there's a 3/8 hole right here. You actually can hook up your tripod or your gimbal to this. So that in a nutshell is the C70. I do wish that the menu did have a touch interface to it, you know, because that would be nice to have, because it is a little bit finicky to keep using the joystick and the dials to navigate through the menus, because there's a lot of settings to go in there. I do wish the monitor was a little bit brighter, and I do wish the autofocus was slightly better than what it is currently right now, but I'm sure Canon will update some of these things in the near future. But the C70, to me, honestly, it's a great camera, and it's something that I'm really heavily considering for my own personal usage. A, because of the size, the image quality that's coming out of this, and of course the built-in ND filters, because I don't need to invest so much. And this is something that we talk about a lot of times when we're recommending cameras to people, is like, yes, it might be small and it might be inexpensive now, but by the time you rig it up, you're spending a lot more money, and you might be close to what this is, and it's all inside of this. Those are my thoughts on the camera. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Be safe out there, stay out of windy situations like we're in right now, and we'll chat to you soon. Take care.